congregate and reflect even after elections. And dialogue is the best way to live for human being in human civilization. And therefore, the NATCO report, which has been adopted by Parliament, according to me, it should be speedily implemented. There's no need to delay. Number one, IEBC is an institution that should be alive throughout. It should be alive throughout. Even as we prepare for 2027, the new chair and commissioners must begin preparing for 2027 so that we really strengthen the independence of that institution, and the fact that there are a number of constituencies that are vacant and a number of wards that are vacant. So therefore, we'll need IEBC in place as soon as yesterday, according to me. And therefore, Parliament should expedite the process and ensure that IEBC is in place. And the audit of 2022 general elections is a mandate of IEBC as well. That's the work they need to do. They can't do it without commissioners. Part of the highlights of NATCO report is establishment of the office of the official leader of the opposition. Otienda Molo in 2010 Constitution, you will agree that it was a tragedy to not to allow the office of the leader, official leader of the opposition in this country, because of course our democracy has been heavily borrowed and tradition from Britain, and therefore it has been very difficult after every election after the post-2010 to manage the politics of the country after election. And there is need to have that office, and there is need to have the official leader of the opposition in Parliament so that government can be checked. As Kenya Kwanza, we believe that government must be checked. It must be checked in a structured manner.
Thank you.
It must be checked by an office that is resourced by the taxpayers so that we have decent and political hygiene in this country is what we need moving forward. And there are, of course, several other highlights like the two-third gender rule. We don't need to talk about it 14 years down the line after enactment of our constitution. We should move and implement what needs to be implemented. Other offices like the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary needs to be entrenched, and many, many more others. And I don't think it is difficult to conclude the process of the statutes, and we cannot try and imagine that now we are getting into another confrontation. And you know, the Bible says, in my Father's house, there is room enough for all of you. This is the type of politics that we need to develop in this country, that every citizen is part of the growth of this nation and is part of nation building. And we open space for literally every Kenyan who wants to participate.
Thank you.
And that explains why even the AU chair is very critical for my former party leader and my friend Raila Amolo Odinga. And so that strategically, while building Kenya, we will be driving the agenda of the African continent, and particularly Agenda 2063 of the African continent, and particularly the African continental free trade area. Those, we must think broadly and act broadly. And when there are two smart lawyers here, I'm sure they'll be able to stretch their minds and apply their minds on how to do good things moving forward.
Okay, and of course, at some point I would love to hear your sentiments regarding the judgment there on life sentencing that is declared non-constitutional as it is right now and moving forward. So what will that really mean when you get a life sentence? But talking of prayers, it is back to the drawing board for Deputy President Gachagua in the Mount Kenya region. Or has he been forced to swallow humble pie? Deputy Gachagua is asking for forgiveness from the Kenyatta family after constantly hammering them since he was elected together with President William Ruto in an escalation of political animosity and ideological differences in the period leading up to the 2022 general election. Deputy Gachagua, who served as Uhuru's personal assistant in his early days in politics, is also attempting to galvanize the Mount Kenya region that supported William Ruto almost to a voter in the last general election. Jeff Kirui has more.
Some of them are in their final stages, but For the first time, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is a remorseful man. The second in command is reaching out for forgiveness from the Kenyatta family and specifically the former First Lady Mama Ngina Kenyatta.
Ntukwenda kwira maitu ucio witu haria ari aturekerete ciana ciake tondu wari uteti muru itakwenda gukona ringi nyumba ino itu ndikwenda tugakinya hau ringi ati no twagire aciari aitu gitio ni undu woteti tari na kuri ori uteti ucio no wathirire no ciugo icio ni nditu handu twana muikia jino handu twana mutengora maitu turekere.
In an interview with Kameme TV, Gachagua, who has been an ardent critic of the Kenyatta family, is gradually climbing down from his high horse, also seemingly extending an olive branch to retired President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Ni twarumanaga tugekanire ciugo na ni andu a nyumba imwe andu magirirwo ni gucira kiugo kimwe na nikio waiguire ndauga mwaka muhituku kinya Uhuru wa Kenyatta ni mwana witu ayo gitio na ndakana cokerio ndi mundu ndakana tengurwo ayo gitio ta muthamaki wariho na tukimwira maria twanamwira matari mega aturekere.
Gachagua has been on an onslaught on the Kenyattas ever since he pledged his allegiance to William Ruto, then serving as deputy president up until recently, even after the Kenya Kwanza regime clinched power.
Ile mashamba yote walichukua Mau, waangalia hata kama ni nusu. Wape watu ya Mau na watoto yao nikiwemo. That's all we're asking. They are not late. Of course, from 1963, they have never buffered.
His tiff with retired President Uhuru Kenyatta so profound for a man who at one time was a personal assistant planning Uhuru Kenyatta's daily engagements between 2002 and 2006.
Mimi, yule jamaa ya kwetu, haki ya Mungu alikuwa amenipangia vibaya. Alikuwa amenipanga kunifunga mwaka 50 nikufie jela. Nyinyi ndio mliniokoa. Nasema asante. Nyinyi ndio mliniokoa. Si hata alikuwa ameninyang'anya pesa yangu. Si nimerudishiwa juzi. Alikuwa ameninyang'anya mali yangu. Alikuwa amenibakishia tu bibi na watoto.
Gachagua is now upbeat about the unity of Mount Kenya region. Only a year in office, finding himself in the midst of a storm within his own political backyard that risks undermining his position in Mount Kenya region.
Teti ucio wari muru wa mwaka 2022 na nigurire ndari guteti witu ucenjie wa nyumba ino yitu twaragie kimwe tucirage kimwe ona tungihitania tukaheana itio tutikana kinye handu ringi tukaganira gitio mundu wa nyumba ino yitu.
This call for unity for the region, perhaps catalyzed by the recent announcement by his boss, President William Ruto.
Going forward, if a man is a candidate for president in our party, the woman must be the runner.
Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
All right, Kiharu, Member of Parliament Ndindi Nyoro is now calling on government agencies led by the Kenya Revenue Authority to stop the implementation of punitive taxes against Kenyans without involving them first. Speaking in Nyandarua County, Nyoro, who chairs the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly, seems to speak from both sides of his mouth, since his committee is the one charged with recommending new taxes. But this is not the first time the legislators, majority from the Mount Kenya region, are caught flat-footed by new taxes they helped pass in Parliament. KTN's political affairs reporter, Emmanuel To, explains.
In the latest episode of the hue and cry over the imposition of more taxes on business people in the country, Kiharu Member of Parliament Ndindi Nyoro has now called on government agencies led by the Kenya Revenue Authority to stop the implementation of the increased import duty, terming it punitive. Speaking in Nyandarua County Sunday, Nyoro, who was accompanied by other legislators from the Mount Kenya region, said the taxes were weighing down on their constituents.
Na nauliza all the government, shirika zote za serikali kama KRA, na nauliza kwa heshima, as you do changes and especially increasing duty like the one we saw recently, it is important to do public participation.
The chairperson of the National Assembly Budget and Appropriations Committee also urging the Commissioner General in charge of Domestic Taxes Department, Rispa Simiyu, to engage the business community through public participation first before implementing new taxes.
Unaita wasikadau pamoja, unawauliza. Na nauliza haswa mkubwa wa domestic taxes in Kenya. tafadhali hiyo maneno ya kuongeza duty from 2.5 million to 3 million, tafadhali kwanza ukatisha hiyo maneno, ita wanabiashara, mkae nao chini, kwa sababu wengi walileta bidhaa kama dola iko juu sana, wanaumia hapo, na wakiongezwa hiyo duty kwa njia ya juu sana, wataweza kuuza hizo bidhaa na hasara, ama they pass over that cost to the consumers.
However, while his comments touched on the plight of many Kenyans, it appears the chairperson of the powerful Budget and Appropriations Committee was caught up in the irony of his duties, since it is the committee that he chairs that prescribes new taxes that are then implemented by the taxman. Part of the duties of the National Assembly Budget and Appropriation Committee include to investigate, inquire into and report on all matters related to coordination, control and monitoring of the national budget, and also to evaluate tax estimates.
Mheshimiwa Naibu Rais akiwa.
But this is not the first time the scenario is experienced, coming just a few weeks after legislators from Murang'a County were up in arms over avocado taxes that were part of the Finance Act 2023.
Hata kama hiyo sheria ilipita, hiyo point moja ambayo inaguza primary produce of the farmer, hiyo bwana makamu wa rais, hiyo uangalie vizuri na macho mawili.
The debacle forcing Deputy President Gachagua to convene a crisis meeting with avocado stakeholders, whom he promised to revise the new punitive taxes.
We know there is a challenge with the Finance Act. You cannot make the farmers unable to produce.
The finance bill is a very big document, and within the shortest time possible, you cannot expect a member of parliament who is so busy to have gone even to the nitty-gritties inside to know what is contained in everything.
Nyoro has been on an unspecified mission in the past few months, crisscrossing the country with trips to the northern part of the country, to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga's Nyanza backyard, among other regions including the Mount Kenya region, with pundits arguing he was positioning himself for national politics weeks after a section of legislators from the Mount Kenya region endorsed him to run for the top job in 2032. Emmanuel Cho, KT News, Nairobi.
And we'll be remiss if we don't talk about the floods in Nairobi, where at least 7 people have been reported to have died following heavy floods that caused havoc in the capital city of Nairobi on Sunday night. Among those killed is a police officer attached to Kamukunji police station who was swept away by floods after successfully rescuing 4 people who were trapped in a stall within Country Bus Station, Nairobi. Nairobi has long grappled with the recurring issues of flooding, which has become an all too familiar sight during the rainy seasons.
This is the scene witnessed in several neighborhoods in Nairobi. Flooding causing damage and destruction. The Karatasi Product Company was not spared. Flood waters submerged in these premises and disrupted daily operations. The flood mitigation infrastructure system here seems inadequate.
Shida yenye tuko nayo hapa kubwa sana, si mara ya kwanza. Hii kitu ishatupata karibu mara 3 ikifuatana. Na ni shida ni ile the same. Mto ikijaa maji naingia kwa kampuni ndani. Kampuni kuna vitabu na maji hazielewani. Kitu ya pili. Hapa sasa kazi ni kama si hatuna kazi kwa saa hii. Na sisi peke yetu. Kampuni ziko hapa around karibu kampuni 4 zimepoteza kazi.
Workers at this company are blaming the Nairobi County management for turning a blind eye to the flooding problem that has been plaguing them with every heavy downpour.
Mimi kitu ningependa kuuliza governor, akifanya campaign zake alikuwa metro promise atatengeneza mambo ya drainage na sewer lines. So kama kitu kama hii inaweza fanyika na irudie mara pili, yeye hata kutuma watu kwa ground, hatujaona gari yote ya county government ikikuja huku. Na sisi hapa Nairobi tulimpatia kura. Sasa tunamuuliza kwani ametusahau ama shida iko wapi?
Pupils at Ngei Primary School in Lang'ata faced disruptions in their studies due to a foul odor permeating their school compound. The sewerage system was damaged by heavy rains, causing the perimeter wall to collapse. The sewage spillage also affected nearby residential properties, causing damage.
Na tumekuwa na shida sana wakati mvua inaponyesha, tunakuwa na shida, unakuta kama hapa vile sasa imefurika namna hii, watu kuna wakati mgumu. Watoto waweza kwenda kwenye msalani na pia zienda wakacheza. Na hii imetokana kwa sababu ya poor drainage pattern enyelewekwa na wale ambao wametuzingira kutoka katika tuseme hiyo area ya Lang'ata Center.
Dagoretti North MP Beatrice Elachi has urged the county government to rectify the situation promptly. This request comes as residents affected by the flooding continue to relocate their belongings to safer areas. Elachi has called upon the authorities to take corrective measures going forward, starting from tomorrow, to address the anomaly that has disrupted the lives of the residents in the area.
There's a neighbor of this that was given approvals. The neighbor decided to build concrete on top of a whole line that carries water from the other side to the river. Tomorrow, we must come here with the Nairobi planners. Let us come and look at the whole riparian land and ask ourselves, how do we ensure this should never happen again?
All right, and we do have Senator Tabitha Mutinda, of course, to just tell us what is happening with Nairobi right now. She is a nominated senator of Nairobi. The challenges that we see, the monies that were disbursed by the national government for El Nino, for Nairobi County. Do we have any clue what happened with that particular? The last time I checked, actually, there was proposal to buy some motorboats for Nairobi. I think they will have come in handy. Was that a proposal or it was a joke? It was doing rounds in the social media as well. You can tell us. Good morning.
Good morning, Libal. Good morning. Good to be here. And, you know...
You start with the hard work of explaining to Nairobians.
One, rains are a blessing, and we appreciate and thank God for them, for that. And the floods, I mean, we still blame the county. And the other time we saw that they had done, you know, quite some work with a group of youths called the Green Army in terms of unblocking. But the problem is that they unblocked, they removed the waste, but they put it just adjacent to the trenches. So with time, this waste has just gone back to the same trenches, hence doing the blockage, and that's where the problem has been. Otherwise, the plans had been there, the government had tried, but it needs to do more. More needs to be done. The city is, we cannot expand the city, but the number of people, of course, the population is increasing. In that increment, then, of course, we'll find such things happening because the area is still congested, the area is not expanding. These are some of the challenges, but the county needs to do more. The planning strategies that are happening at the county, I mean, the corruption should stop, because you cannot have buildings coming up right, left, and center without a proper plan. There needs to be proper urban planning. I know the housing project that is going to kick off, and that has also kicked off in Nairobi, will help us, because you realize a small or a bigger area, of course, has a smaller number of people. So the moment we lift up our buildings, then we are going to ensure that there is much more passage and sewerage strategies that are going to be put in place. But in the meantime, more needs to be done. Funds are there. We have funds called the emergency funds in all the counties, actually, because we do oversight as Senate, and we come across funds called the emergency funds, which should be able to take care of such things that will occur. But further to that, you look at the expressway. I mean, the Chinese need to, the expressway, I mean, the Chinese need to try and ensure that we don't see the blockage that we saw on the exit for Haile Selassie that was there the other day. But it's good. It's one thing I always say, to identify a problem. It's another to put a solution onto it. That has been identified, so quick measures should be put in place so that this does not reoccur again. Yeah.
All right, we just want to also talk about what is in briefly in Mount Kenya region as well, unless you want to contribute as well. Wilson Sosion, on the latest development in Nairobi with the rains. It's very unfortunate that in this day and age we can lose 7 lives because of poor drainage and the devastation from the rains as well. I don't know. Let's just begin here. We go sequentially.
Well, first, I think Senator Tabitha Mutinda starts by blaming the county government. I think that's a conversation they should be having internally. The last I checked, the county government of Nairobi is a Kenya Kwanza regime. So in their many retreats and PGs and all that, I expect them to discuss that as priority number one, because for us, we can only join you in blaming, but not so much in action. But secondly, now Senator Mutinda and Senator Manzo also have their job cut out, because the first and primary role of the Senate is to protect the counties and the county government. And the counties is not just protecting the government, it's protecting the people. And so when there's failure, and then in an instance like this, I expect that it would be a top priority in terms of discussion in the Senate, including inviting the governor and his regime to explain the cause of all this. But I think that what we are witnessing is a failure in planning. It's failure in planning in terms of preparedness for the rains. It's failure in planning in terms of allowing constructions that are inimical to flow of water. We've seen places where, there are constructions on riparian, water access areas. We've seen a lot of things that are happening lately that should not happen. And that failure of planning must be called out. It's actually ironical, because there was a time led by the president, they had predicted we'll be having El Ninos, from which source I don't know. And so everyone was in, the president Ruto was on it, Gachagua was on it, Sakaja was on it, and there was El Nino expectation everywhere. As I told Sosion earlier, there's a bit of a problem with the prayers led by this regime, because God usually seems to do the opposite. So when they were praying for the rains at that time, God withheld the rains. There were no rains. And so all the things they had bought and prepared for, I don't know where they went. Because now, without prayer, God has opened the heavens. And now, all those things that were supposed to be ready for preparation, they've suddenly disappeared. They are not coming out. So I think that we must refocus on the issue of our planning. I think that's all I'll say on this question of the rain. But I think you wanted us to go back to where you started with the story of Gachagua.
Yes.
I think what's happening, in my view, and I'll marry the two, because you read the story of Gachagua, and then you put my colleague Ndindi Nyoro also leading some voices of protest on taxation. First, I think that what Gachagua, and it was not just him, even President Ruto did, was unfortunate. They led a scheme of name-calling of the former president and the former president's family, including even going to the extent of attacking the former first lady. Indeed, there was a time that even her security was withdrawn. It is unfortunate. You do not build a nation in that manner by calling people names who came before you, by trying to frustrate them. There was that clear witch hunt, including invasion of the land, I think in uplands. There was the question of attempting to arrest Uhuru's son. It was a clear witch hunt. It was unfortunate in the first place. The fact that Gachagua has now realized it and is apologizing is good, but it's too late. It should not have happened in the first place. But secondly, I don't think Gachagua's apology is independent. I don't think it's just contrite that he has realized that he was wrong. I think it's a result of the things that are happening in Mount Kenya region. I think there's some disquiet that is building. First, there are those who are contending to replace him from his seat, which is public knowledge. And it appears that that line is gaining some level of traction. And for that reason, he needs all the friends that he can gather. And if that friend includes Uhuru Kenyatta, much the better for him. Secondly, I think there's open disquiet in Mount Kenya in terms of some of the actions that have been taken. First, in terms of the overtaxation, because that overtaxation, I think they've just realized, is extremely harmful to many, many business people, even the ordinary citizens in Mount Kenya. And that overtaxation is coming back to bite them. That is why, as he's talking about apologizing to the Kenyattas, he is also talking about resisting taxation. Secondly, this war he has led on illicit alcohol, it's been led in a way that appears to target the Mount Kenya area even more than any other. I don't know whether it means that's where alcoholism has been highest or that's where the illicit drinks are highest, but it has clearly, been a full scale around the Mount Kenya area. So this backlash, I think that Gachagua is feeling it, most of the leaders are feeling it, and now they're trying to entreat themselves to the ordinary citizens by appearing to go back on a number of things that they have stood by. And in that respect, I have also seen now the comments by my friend Ndindi Nyoro trying to caution governmental agencies against issues of over-taxation and all that. I think that that is pretense. And what my colleagues from the Mount Kenya area are doing is described in one word: subterfuge. They are trying to take Kenyans on a subterfuge so that people are confused as to the sources of all this. We have always said, you must stand by what you believe. When the finance bill was brought to the National Assembly, many of us read it and we were very clear that it was wrong. We pointed out several respects in which it was wrong. You cannot, in Parliament, say, pass it without any amendment. And when we try to debate it, you say, put the question. And then you robotically vote for it, and it passes. When then now it starts being implemented, then you start blaming the implementation agencies. They don't make the law. KRA does not make the law. We make the law, including every law on taxation. What my colleagues are doing is immoral. You can't go to Parliament, pass laws for overtaxing Kenyans, then you come out in funerals and in meetings and you blame the agencies that are implementing that law. They must be called out, and they must be called out by the people, and I'm happy. That's what's happening. That's why some of them are taking off on their heels in meetings when the people are going for their blood. You cannot come and tell the people that the finance bill was too big to be read. That is precisely why we are there. And that's the point we were making, that because it is big, it needs in-depth debate, so that those who don't have time to read can listen to those of us who read. And then we can tell them, then they can judge whether it is right or wrong to pass it. But they never allow that discussion. They always come and say, put the question, and then it is passed. It is just wrong.
Right, Dan Mazo,
well,
you think this is purely pretext? Is Ndindi Nyoro trying to be politically correct? Because now the situation has changed on the ground, as it says, as Otende says now, it's trying to confuse the people on where or who is actually the legislator and has the legislative mandate. It's not the agencies.
The finance bill, which Ndindi Nyoro passed with a lot of force, has brought a lot of trouble to a lot of Kenyans, and especially economically. The moment you overtax Kenyans, you are overtaxing, you make it very difficult for the lowest people in the society, the people who should have been lifted. And these are the people also who bear the biggest, economy, who carry the economy in the country because of the expenses. So what happened is, under the finance bill, fuel is still at 16%, moved from 8%. And unless you change that act and take it to 8%, you're just lying to Kenyans that you have lowered fuel prices. And this lie is now what cannot be sustained everywhere in Kenya, including Central Kenya. And the people of Central Kenya came out very strongly against it, especially when there was taxation of avocados and many other things. And the members of parliament who passed this finance bill were very busy retreating, including now Ndindi Nyoro himself. And that tells you that it is very hot in Central Kenya. And the Kenya Kwanza government is actually a Central Kenya government. So the moment Central Kenya pulls out, then there's no longer Kenya Kwanza. And this is why you're finding people like Rigathi Gachagua retreating. It is not Rigathi Gachagua who should be apologizing. It is the president himself. Rigathi Gachagua has been pushed into this by the president. But as they always say, a wise man changes his mind. Rigathi Gachagua is very lucky that he has a prayerful wife and a wife who reads the Bible.
So I'm sure she's able to advise him, and she has advised him correctly. When you go wrong, it is always good to apologize. And when you apologize, you bear the brunt. What happened to the Kenyatta's family was extremely unfair. And I really thank the Kenyattas for keeping quiet about it. It's not that they could not fight, but they decided you have wronged us, and they said nothing about it. And from Chinua Achebe wisdom, you know, when a chick had been taken from a duck, you know, by a Hanti Ingo, when it took it to the mother, was when you picked this chick, what did the mother say? He said nothing, then return it. And when they went to pick one from a hen and it made noise, they said, we can consume this. I really wanted to thank the Kenyattas for being very wise and for, you know, behaving in a manner to hold the nation together, despite being taken through a very difficult moment. And whatever happened, you know, to them can happen to anyone in this country. And I think they've set a good example of when that happens. And there are many things which needs to be corrected in this country. There are many hills which have been committed against Kenyans. I doubt whether the president will apologize for them. But it's always good to apologize to the country, but also apologize to Parliament for hijacking it. All these laws have been passed, you know, with Parliament being a rubber stamp. I think it's a high time Parliament was allowed to do his job, and the executive accepted what comes from Parliament. Otherwise, with the floods, it's a very serious matter. We have lost a policeman, we have lost people. All those cars which have been soaked is a very big damage to innocent Kenyans. I don't know who is going to bear these. I believe City now will face serious suits, you know, for poor planning, for failing to implement planning properly, for failing to clear the drainages even early before the rains come, despite a lot of warnings. And even the expressway, you know, when it turns into a river, it's a very fast-moving river. I think the people managing the expressway must now look at it very carefully. And also to Kenyans, when it has rained,